Hey, everybody. About over a year ago, I switched the podcast up a little bit, moving away from purely sales experts, sales experienced reps, and more onto who the audience thought were the best reps, who had the best skills. And it's been kind of dominated by that for at least a year now. And I think it's been successful for a lot of reasons. One, people want to hear from other reps. They want to hear what's working. And also, I think some of the distinctions that have been shared are insanely valuable. And what I found was that it wasn't the stereotypical salesperson, the hard worker, the grinder. Of course, they all work hard. But we know that. There's no secret to working hard and being determined and being competitive. But what's on top of that? What comes next after you work hard and smart and are determined? And then next came, I kind of realized this, the process. Everyone seemed to have a process. Some could articulate it better than others, but they all had this sense of what a deal was and how to take a deal. Then on top of this, the key distinction that I found was this outward mindset. Words like curiosity, empathy, interest, caring, respect kept repeating themselves. And I was like, well, maybe I'm onto something here. Maybe this is something that is a key differentiator. And I started then applying it to the reps that I know and people that were having a hard time learning about what works in sales. And the inward mindset clearly doesn't. It's like the inverse of hard work. Not wanting to work doesn't really help you be successful. Being disconcerting, picking the things you work on, very important. But if you just don't want to do anything, nothing happens. The inward mindset is thinking about yourself, and this is really how we start as human beings. And typically we have an epiphany early in our career that we need to start thinking like the other reps. And the surprising thing that I found about these great salespeople, these patterns, they were so professional, so empathetic, so considerate, and fun to work with. And that's what this episode today is about. I'm being interviewed in this episode by a friend of mine on another podcast. And I really wanted to share this with their audience, because if you have this outward mindset, sales becomes a lot simpler. It tends to start making sense, where before it was either confusing or a black box, or you thought it was your personality, that outgoing, gregarious personality. Let's get into this interview. It's a two-part series because the interview turned into an hour. I don't want to put it all out at once because I think you need to take some of it, listen to it, internalize it. And I've incorporated this mindset into both courses. Start the conversation, get the meeting, and closing the complex sale, because it helps reps understand why certain things work and why others do not. I want to thank our friends over at Co-Video for helping us out with the podcast. If you're looking for a clean, nice way of staying engaged with your clients. Now, some people misinterpret that Start the Conversation is about video emailing. I actually recommend video emailing as kind of like the second or third contact with people. And you can try it as the first one, but it might be too time consuming for that. But video is a game changer. Certainly we're all experiencing it now. Being able to connect and see more than one sense, engage both the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic senses into a message. So go to covideo.com, check out their instructions on video. You can use them for pretty much any part of it and see if video email is a solution for you. I'll sum it up at the end, and make sure if you're in the courses, you're checking out both the office hours and the one-on-ones. There's fresh stuff coming out every week. Here we go.
Today I have Brian Burns with us, and we're going to be talking about winning in sales, why emotional intelligence matters. Brian, welcome to Outside Sales Talk.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me.
So by way of introduction, Brian has 20 years of experience in sales. He specialized in selling enterprise software and currently works with leadership teams to help create and dominate their market segments. He also is the host of 2 podcasts in the top 15 in business on iTunes, which are the B2B Revenue Leadership Show and the brutal truth about sales and selling. He's also the author of 4 books on B2B sales, including The Maverick Selling Method. I can't talk today. The Maverick Selling Method, Simplifying the Complex Sale. Brian, first question. You talk about emotional intelligence a lot. What is emotional intelligence, or EI, in the context of sales, and why is it important?
Yeah, I mean, it is really the things that salespeople need to focus on, because we think about knowing the market, business acumen, knowing the product. But what we really need to do is know ourselves and know our clients. Too often we're stuck in our own head thinking that it's our job to sell, it must be someone else's job to buy. It's no one's job to buy our product. We have to connect with other human beings. And no one teaches emotional intelligence, or what I call the outward mindset, which kind of like expands on emotional intelligence. There's emotional intelligence, both internal stuff, regulating your mood, the meaning that you give things, rejection, ambivalence, pressure, all the things that we face in sales. Those are hard to manage. And they blind us to what we really should be doing. And that is connecting with another human being, empathizing with them, being curious about their world and what they're going through, instead of just that we have to make a certain number by the end of the month.
Absolutely. And everybody talks about IQ. How does EQ or EI or EQ, how does it stack up against IQ? Is one more important than the other in sales, or is one really are they equally important?
Well, you don't really find that many super IQ people in sales.
I think we're brilliant, Brian. What are you talking about?
It's like, if you're acing your SATs and, reading comes naturally to you and equations kind of are the way you think, you're probably not getting into sales. People fall into sales 1 or 2 reasons. They either can't do anything else or they're money motivated. So you might find somebody with super IQ and money motivated, but EQ, the ability to connect with another human being, is something that we're not born with. It's just the opposite, right? We're born with the selfish need to eat, sleep, and that's about it, right? And a couple of other things. And we grow up and we're not really socialized to it. I think women are much more socialized to guys. I don't remember watching The Sopranos where AJ gives his mother the Matrix for her birthday. It's like...
That is a low EI moment.
It's like, oh, thanks. I was hoping for this, right? And that's kind of how we are kind of socialized. And, maybe in college we kind of get it because we have to live with someone else that we don't know. We're met with a bunch of people that we don't know, and we have to become friends with them quickly. But then we get in the work world, and especially today, we get scripts and KPIs and activities that have nothing to do with connecting with another human being.
There's something right there that I think is so important, and that is that emotional intelligence can be learned. Can you tell me, how does one go about learning emotional intelligence? How do you sharpen that sword Where do you start?
It's hard because like the internal part about being self-aware. I don't know if you've ever noticed a salesperson that just talks too much, talks over people, doesn't hear what's being said, and just expresses their needs and their opinions.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard. You know, I had a rep one time where I go, look, you just got to stop talking. Right?
Well, you know, I had a sales manager when I was early in my career, and we'd be on a phone call, and he would just like tap mute when I was about to talk and go, listen, and then he would unmute it.
Powerful tool. And how do you learn that? Well, you know, the market teaches us, we get feedback all the time, but we have to have some kind of epiphany, whether it's our income or lost deal, that says like, well, maybe it's me. Maybe I could be better. And too often I talk to sales reps and they're like, what will I learn? What will I know? And I ask, do you ever play a sport? And guys definitely have a sport. Other people, you ever play an instrument? You ever cook? You have a passion? I go, you know how to do it, right? You learn how to do it in an hour. Become good at it takes a lifetime. You know, I've been playing chess since I was a kid. You know, last week an 8-year-old beat me, right? I know how to play chess. I can become better, right?
Yeah, well, and I think everyone has some level of emotional intelligence, but it's a skill that for salespeople is so important, and it's so hard often when you've lost a sale or something's gone wrong or a sales cycle took longer than it should have because you didn't build the trust that you could have. It's hard to point to that moment where, because you're just kind of behaving like you, and you might not realize I'm not putting myself in their shoes enough, or I'm not emotionally aware enough, or I'm not aware that last objection of theirs frustrated me, and now I'm talking over them a little bit or being a little more aggressive. It's hard to learn these subtleties, but like you say, I think these are things that anyone can get better at, and it's not just going to help you in your sales career; it's going to help you in relationships with friends, with spouses, etc.
Right, because it's all about understanding someone else's perspective, being curious about them. What do they care about? Because who do you like to talk to? Right? People who are interested in you, who are curious about what you're facing, what you're experiencing, what you're up against, what you like to watch on TV, what you like to do in your free time, what you're passionate about. And instead, people say, well, as long as you have enough value, it'll all work out. Maybe if they have a recognized need and they're in market, right? If you're at the very middle of the path of a sales decision. But most of us are prospecting. We're trying to connect and communicate with somebody. And when they see the caller ID or the inbound in-mail, why are they going to read it? Something for them, not something about you. Checking in again for the 5th time. Where's the order? You know, they don't care about updating you on the order, nor do they want to give you bad news. And this seems old school, but it's like we're still mammals. You know, the Industrial Revolution is, 120 years old, right? We've been around for 200,000 years. We're used to just fighting and killing each other. We're not used to communicating and working together. And
Absolutely.
These things are not taught. They're assumed. And you look at all the friction in society. Every human conflict is about the inability to understand someone else's position. You get cut off in traffic. Do you think that they purposely got up this morning going, I'm going to cut him off today. I can't wait to see him on the 101. No, right? They're like in a hurry, and there's a little bit of an opening that's a little bit smaller than it should be, and they go for it, and you feel offended, right? You get onto an airplane. You ever notice the line isn't exactly uniform? It's kind of like this funnel where people just go in, and it's like edging each other. Think of every human conflict. Is anybody 100% wrong? No, it's like a little bit of stuff that gets escalated, and all of a sudden adrenaline hormones take over and it goes crazy. Emotional intelligence and the outward mindset is taking a step back, cutting the other person a break, and understanding what they're going through. right? And I'm sure you see it as a CEO all the time, what the board thinks and what the employees think. They want all these benefits and stuff. And it's like, well, we got to get revenue. Revenue comes in, everything works out. Revenue doesn't come in, things get a little sketchy.
And that's the famous. Eric Schmidt had a famous quote about that. The old CEO of Google. It was revenue solves all problems.
It does.
Like, oh, we have problems. Well, more revenue would solve that problem.
Yeah. And when salespeople, when they take the time to go and learn what their ideal customer does all day, right? In your case, salespeople. You came from a sales background. It's easy for you. Early in my career, I sold to software engineers. I was a software engineer. I could get the technical sale really easily. I knew what they were up against. I knew the words that they used. I know what their day was like. I know what their value system was. But then I was selling $1 million piece of software, and then I had to go talk to an executive, and I tell them how great it works and how this function. They could care less. They're like, why am I doing this? I don't know your company. You have no brand recognition. Do you have any customers? Doesn't matter. We can do this 10 times faster. They didn't know what that meant. And
they're like, is it slow right now?
Right. Yeah, sure. They're billing 80 hours a week, but that's cheaper than buying your hardware right now. But it won't be in 6 months.
And I think this is so important. You're talking about adapting your emotional intelligence and adapting your behavior to different situations. Tell me about different types of situations and different ways you would adapt your EI to those situations, like executive versus the software engineer that you're selling to as or your customers, or maybe an in-person meeting versus a cold call. A lot of people are in today's economy changing the way they were approaching customers or prospects, and so they need to kind of rethink how they're doing that. And
right, and
I help your thoughts on that.
Help reps with this because the cold calling, its effectiveness has gone down pretty quickly over the last decade. You got caller ID, you got cell phones, people don't pick up their phone, so you got that part of it. But even when you get them, everyone teaches to talk about you, the value you add to them. But they're not open-minded. There's probably 2 or 3 things in your life right now that I could cold call you about that you'd be interested in, right? Maybe you need something repaired at your house. Maybe you looking for a new car, new TV, new clothes, trip, vacation, whatever. You might be in market, but if you're not, what's the likelihood of me taking you from unaware and uninterested to interested and curious? Pretty small. Really hard. Yeah. But if we're having a conversation, I was talking to a rep today and his new opener is like, Jesus, I just moved back with my parents. It's a nightmare. Right. And every client just cracks up. Goes, that must be a disaster. Because everyone's got parents. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. When my parents come and visit me for a little while, that's just a week seems like enough. Living with them.
Yeah. Yeah, as my brother says, after 2 days, it's like fish, right? It's like it starts to smell. And so, but I've taught people, if you talk about what they care about, what they're passionate about, and it takes a little bit of research, a little bit of digging, a little bit of humility, you can find something that they care about. I got one of my students in the course in a conversation with the CEO of Delta in 30 minutes. Okay, so they just announced this new service that they had. Now, how many compliments do you think the CEO of Delta gets?
Right now, probably not that many.
How many times do you land and go, I got to tell these people this flight was just magical, right? It's like
so smooth. Those peanuts were so good.
It was on time, and those seats so luxurious. Those peanuts, yummy. That movie, never heard of it before, right? No, they get complaints all day long. But if you can connect with somebody about what they care about, they engage without the ask. The problem is everyone's got the ask. And, like the Hare Krishnas, they used to give out the flower, but then it was a long conversation, and you're like, not worth the flower.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think they're also using another key sales skill. People don't. Yeah, the
Law of reciprocation.
yeah, I knew there was a word for it. Reciprocation. They've given you something, so you feel you have to, be nice to them and give them something. It like taps into some kind of lizard brain part of us where if you've done something nice for someone, they want to be nice to you.
Right. And we tend to forget this, and we turn it into a bribe. Right. It's like, hey, I sent you those cookies. You got to take my demo. Well, you don't go from cookies to demo. Right.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to cookies to conversation.
Although I have taken meetings just because someone like sent me a bottle of wine. I'm like, now I've got to hear this guy
You feel
out,
obligated, right?
Well, and there's also a part of me that says like I've hired people who literally showed up at our office to turn in their resume in person. It was a salesperson, so I think that it automatically made me appreciate their aggression and fearlessness. But I've hired people from doing that, and you turn out to be a great sales rep. But I think there's also something going on where if someone has gone that far out of their way for me to buy me a bottle of wine or show up on my doorstep, I'm like, well, this is expensive for them. There's a real reason that they're here, and I should probably give them the time of day here. I mean, my time's not that valuable. I should give them the 5-10 minutes, right?
Right. And if you think of outward mindset or emotional intelligence, have you ever gotten a present that it wasn't the cost, but it just touched you? It was exactly something that you appreciated. You don't need it. You weren't waiting for it. It wasn't obvious. It just showed thought, caring, a little bit of effort, and understanding. And when someone does that, and I've had that done, and you're like, it was a $60 present. I think I paid for it. So it wasn't the money, it was the thought. And then you get just the opposite, like the AJ example from Sopranos, where it's like, the Matrix DVD is really for him. And the mother knows it immediately.
She's like, do you want to see the Matrix tonight? Yeah.
But and so much of sales, that's really what we're doing. Are we really being thoughtful about what will help this other person? Talking about what they care about and meeting them where they are. Right? Because they may not be thinking about what we sell right now. They may not be aware it exists. They may not even feel the pain that it solves.
Well, and what would you say to someone who's trying to work on their emotional intelligence or their empathy skills? How can they better understand what is going on in someone else's mind or your prospect's organization, and understand how they make decisions, understand them better so that you can do better in your interactions with them?
Yeah, I mean, the easy hack is to go to that persona within your own company. If you sell to CFOs, go take your CFO out to lunch or coffee or bribe them for an hour. Your CIO, your CEO, your CMO, your CRO, so that you can say like, well, what do you care about? What do people like you care about? What do you hate? How do you get rewarded? What excites you? What scares the hell out of you? What do you listen to? What do you read? Whose blog do you read? Who do you follow? And then just become a student of that. Use their vocabulary. Find their value system. What's their reward? What's their interest? What are they passionate about? And then you can start to build conversational items and look for symptoms around the problem that you solve. Like in your case, you ever figure out, what's the best route for me today? What's the best geographic use of my time today? I don't want to think about it. I don't want to keep track of it. I don't want to monitor it. I want you guys to do that for me. Have you ever said, like, where should I go next? Right? And spend a half hour trying to figure it out. And then by the time the half hour's up, the traffic's busy and you're going the wrong way. You got to find a place for dinner or a hotel. You start talking about the symptoms around the problem. So, would you ever be interested in solving that or seeing the alternatives? You can keep, opening up Google Maps and trying to swipe up and down while you drive, and you got your elbow on the steering wheel and your foot on.
We've got to get you selling Badger, I'll tell you.
And you try and put a little humor in, because humor breaks down the professional pretense that we all have, right? You get somebody laughing, and all of a sudden you get that commonality. Because when you're contacting another human being, it's like, who are you? Do I know you or do I not know you? Then what do you want? Do you want to help me or you want me to help you? That's the sequence we go through. And guess what? If I don't know you, not interested. If you want me to help you, get in line.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Because great analogy. It's like when your doorbell rings, what's the first thing you do? You look out the window or the little peepee hole, and you're not expecting anybody. And you see a stranger there with a book or something. You're like, not home. But if it's the FedEx guy and your new MacBook Pros 2 weeks early, you're like, hello, brother.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You're like, where you been all my life?
And how can you build that understanding? How do you learn to walk in their shoes? How do you, when you're looking at a prospect or a customer, how do you learn what motivates them? What are their pain points? How do you get inside of not just knowing stuff about them as a general role, but actually get to know them and what's going on with them?
Well, they leave little crumbs all over the internet. Like with the Delta guy. I mean, it was literally 5 minutes. I go, look, here's this press release, say this. No one's complimented this guy since he got in there. Right? He said, what a great idea. How's it working? Replied in like 15 minutes. And he was emotionally intelligent enough to know our role and what we really wanted. We wanted to break the ice, and we wanted him to introduce as a CIO. And he copies the CIO on it. And boom.
Yeah.
And the CEO tells the CIO, hey, you might want to talk to these guys. You got an open conversation.
Yeah, it happens all the time. It's, people email me and I'm like, well, I'm obviously not the person to talk to, but I forward it to, I generally don't copy them, but I'll forward it to the person in the organization who, like, it's their area. And I'm like, oh, do you want me to introduce this guy or what? But so that can be an effective means of getting something in front of somebody.
Right. Because how many pitches do you get a day? And
a lot.
They're verbose and they're, buzzword, latent, and you go, I don't know what this is.
Yeah. I
don't know who it is. I don't know what it does. I don't know what I should do with it.
It's actually helpful because sometimes people will shoot me like a, 3-sentence LinkedIn email or whatever. And I'll be like, in-mail, I guess it's called, but I'll read it. I'll read the value proposition, and I know who in the organization should be looking at this. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll let them know that this exists, and I'll ask them if they want to be introed. So by dealing with me, by me as the gatekeeper, the salesperson had to boil it down to just its essence. Because if you're very complex or confusing at all, I'm not even going to understand what you're talking about in some complex technical thing. I'm like, I don't know if we use that. I have no idea. But if you're descriptive, I'll know. And keep it general enough that I can actually follow it, I'll be able to forward it to the right person.
Yeah. And that's the best they'll get. Right. And that person who receives it goes, oh, another message from Steve wanting me to look at a product. Doesn't he know how busy I am?
The poor marketing team, because there's so much cool like MarTech out there in the world, and I'm always like, hey, have you checked out this thing? They track this with this button. It's cool. Like,
well, that's it. Because we live in a world today where it's not that we don't want it, don't need it, and can't afford it. It's just like, where is it on our list?
Mm-hmm.
Right? All those no decisions, status quo. It's like they can afford it. You can tell if they can afford it before you contact them. You can see if they're hiring or laying off. You know what their funding is. You can reverse engineer their financials. How many employees do they have? What's their revenue? It's not hard. You know, the budget excuse is an excuse, right? I've heard people, I was trying to sell to Apple. They said, they don't have any budget. Well, they got $200 billion. It's not a priority is what it is.
Yeah.
So
well, how do you do that? How do you, when you're interacting with a prospect or a customer, and how do you gauge how interested they are in your product or service? Is it based on body languages? Is it based on what they're saying or what they're not saying?
Yeah. The key is to start where they are, because people don't like to talk about their problems unless it's an active problem. Now, I don't know if you've been to a doctor lately, right? Let's say your knee hurts. What do you want? You want a prescription. Okay, prescription, I'll take a shot. If he says operation, you're like, it doesn't hurt that bad.
My knee's fine.
It's raining.
Yeah.
The doctor can't just say, it needs to be replaced or we need to do this. You're like, no, it doesn't. You don't believe because there's no social proof. What does he have to do? He has to walk you down a path. So how long has it been hurting? When does it hurt? Okay, let's take an x-ray. Then he has to show you the x-ray and say, you see this thing here? It should be attached. Right?
It appears to be torn.
Right. So the aspirin will get you for 4 hours. The shot will get you for 24 hours. You need an operation. Otherwise, it doesn't just find its way back. You know, this is something that requires, you have to meet them where they are and show them the path. Because otherwise they say, I'm fine. Because a good friend of mine's a cardiologist. He goes, I can't just say, we got to do surgery. I got to take x-rays. I got to show them. I got to explain, if you don't do this, between 6 months and 18 months, you're going to wake up one night and you're not going to be able to breathe and you're not going to be able to stand up, and hopefully we can get you to the hospital and then do it. And most of the time when they're in the hospital, they show the x-ray, you're not going home, because they know if you go home, you're not coming back.
Right. So, we got to do this now.
We got to do this now. And people, are very resistant to that, unless they're in market and they're desirable. You can sense that. The inbound leads are pretty easy to process, right? They've already know the problem. They know you're an option. So what's important to you? What's your situation? You can tell where you fit against the alternatives. Let's do a trial, get you used to it, get that transfer of ownership. So now it's part of your workflow and your life. And all of a sudden it's now natural. And pulling it out is more painful than processing the paperwork to get it bought.
And is this related to the mammal to mammal selling that you're always talking about? Yeah. How does mammal to mammal selling differentiate from people to people selling?
Well, people don't think, they react. Okay. I mean, look at all the social discourse. Is this thinking or reacting? Right? Crowd think, all this, whatever pops into their head, their emotional response, on both sides. It makes no sense. In two cases, one was about sleeping in a parking lot. The other is about, $20 of cigarettes. Is that worth any of this? It escalates. People react. No one's thinking. If you were thinking, run home, go away. It's
sure.
Right?
But we're mammals. We
are mammals.
It's funny. A dog ownership teaches you this. They have the same emotional circuitry that we do, and obviously, monkeys and stuff do. But when you own a dog, you can see them. They react. They react with emotion, and it's the same emotions that we have.
They are,
and we can choose. We can choose to only act on those emotions, or we can choose to think things through. But
right. I mean, we do have a prefrontal cortex, but you got to understand that's 5% of our brain power. So it's 5% against 95. Guess who wins?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Does anybody not know how to lose weight?
So you're saying the mammal side, the instinct side, and the reactive side, that's the 95, and the 5% is the thought part, the logic part.
Yes.
Is EI or instincts involved in one but not the other, or does it touch both to some degree?
Absolutely. Right. You never wake up at 3 a.m. going, I hope I have some leftover kale shake in the fridge. Right. You wake up and you go, I bet there's some of that pizza, that lasagna, that chocolate cake, something sweet and savory and salty.
Mm-hmm.
Right. EQ and outward mindset is 100% prefrontal cortex. That's why it's so hard. It takes conscious effort, repetition. It's not knowing, it's doing. Everyone reads a book about EQ and they think they know what it is. And they do. They just can't apply it because it's hard. Right?
What's interesting is some of the smartest people I know have some of the worst emotional intelligence that of anyone I've run into.
Well, think about it. How do you get smart IQ? It's not being with other people. It's being by yourself, programming, reading, studying. And how do you develop social skills? When I was an engineer, it would go 3 or 4 days before I talked to somebody. And I'd open my mouth and it was like a little bit of learning curve there because there's no interaction. Sure. Your head, and it was great. You're in the zone, you're in the flow. But to connect with another human being requires you, like, what are they going through right now? Right? Like when they're getting cut off in traffic. They didn't plan that. Maybe they're going to the hospital to see a dying parent. Maybe something just bad happened to them. And they didn't have the consideration to put their blinker on.
If you look at skill set, nobody talks about the outward mindset. People pick apart the elements, but no one's putting it together. So I'm going to start working on this. It's already in pretty much both of the courses, where we dissect each persona and so that you can understand it and visualize it. Because without it, we're blinded by our own needs. In my first book, I talk about this, is that law number 1, people will do what's in their own best interest. Now, this is obvious to people, but we're blinded by our own best interest, so we can't see what the other person's best interest is. And what I tend to see epiphanies with people is either they're maybe the oldest child where they're responsible for taking care of their brothers and sisters, or they've taken care of a pet where they've had to learn how another creature thinks and needs, feeding, cleaning, caring for something else. And it's not so much just putting that person's interest above yours. It's not. It's considering them so that you can understand why other people do what they do. And to start where they are versus starting where we are. All the stuff I see on the internet, YouTube, LinkedIn, whatever, about sales, always starts where the rep is, talking about the product. Some talk about the problems it solves. But what we have to do is get into the head of the other person and start where they are. Are they in market? Great. Start with the product and the problem, and you'll have some success. But most of us are not in market for what the other person is selling. So where are we? We don't care. Not only do we not care, we're annoyed by that person talking about that problem. I don't feel that pain. In the courses, I teach you how to work around that, how to build it up. It's not about coming up with a better pitch. It's about using the outward mindset to connect with another human being and start where they are and build up to where you want them to be. And this is how conversation has always worked and how smart people have always done it. But it takes a little bit of forethought. It takes a little bit of understanding, and it takes a lot of practice to internalize and develop it. It's not a script. It is a process, but the words need to be your own. They need to be specific to your market, the person you're talking to, and you have to develop this sense of where the other person is and understand how they are interpreting these words. I think the outward mindset above all others is key to becoming great at sales. You can become okay at sales, playing the numbers game and working your butt off. I've seen people, become good B players doing that, but you wear out because you're a carbon form, meaning you're a human being, and you tend to get beaten down. So if you're looking for a smarter way, a more effective way of doing this, go to b2brevenue.com and don't view it as a course. View it as a year-long personal development process, because you're not alone. It's not just me talking about slides. It's lessons, applying the lessons step by step, hearing how other people are doing it. You get community with office hours and one-on-ones. Office hours are an hour meetup every other week where it's topic-based discussion, Q&A, and you get to hear how other people are applying the principles of the course into their particular market. And on an office hours just a couple weeks ago, somebody was applying it to one of the students, and the student goes, "You know what, Brian? It worked on me, and I now see the difference." So these epiphanies that we all need to take and have and practice. So look at it as a year of development. To be able to start conversations with complete strangers is a talent and a skill. It's not a quiz. But once you have it, once you've developed it, once you've built upon it, you can turn it into a system. You can break it down into bite-sized pieces. You can automate it with technology, augment it with virtual assistants. And I show people how to do that so that you can scale it. I've scaled it. I've got a machine going right now that I've made it so simple that I outsource it to very inexpensive people so it can scale, and I leverage technology as well. The other part is closing the complex sale. No one teaches this stuff. You need probably 10, 15 years of just, head-butting experience working on complex sales, especially in the hardest of the hard. These are not complex sales where you're the incumbent and you're just trying to get a bigger deal. Or you got a big brand name and you're just globbing something onto an annual contract. These are you're the underdog. You're trying to sell something new, something hard. Nobody joins these courses where their job is easy. They join these courses because their job is hard. And you get to hear it, because we've been doing this for a couple years, deals from beginning to end. The lessons along the way, putting yourself in that person's place, is just invaluable, because it's not just learning a lesson. In the past, I've had people take the course. "Oh, I know it. I took it." "Okay. How you do?" "Well, yeah, I get it." "Okay. How's it working?" They don't want to apply it. They just want to feel comfortable that they know it. It's not a book. People pick up books, and there are some great books that should be, on your shelf, in your bag all the time, because the lessons take a long time to develop. Their habits, their skill sets, and they do not just happen. So come back for part 2 of the outward mindset. I might drop it this week, or I might spread it out a little bit so that you get a little variety. And let me know what you think about this. If you see me on LinkedIn, give a little thumbs up, a little comment, a little share to the content. If you're a YouTuber, go to YouTube. Just search Brian Burns Sales on YouTube. and it'll all come up if you're a visual person. We'll see you next time.